Chris and Ben, old friends who hadn't seen each other in 10 years since their college days, were finally reunited. After college, Chris had moved to New York to build a career as a financier, while Ben had returned to Minnesota, where he worked as a high school teacher. Their paths had diverged and life had pulled them in different directions, but the bond they shared back in college had remained. One day, as Chris was sorting through some old belongings, he found a photo of the two of them fishing during their college years. It sparked a wave of nostalgia, and without hesitation, he picked up the phone and called Ben. "How about we go fishing again?" he suggested. Ben, equally eager to reconnect, agreed immediately. They decided on the Blue Lakes Nature Reserve in Wisconsin, a place they both remembered fondly for its great fishing and scenic beauty. They met early on a Saturday morning, the crisp air filling their lungs as they greeted each other with a handshake and smiles. The years had passed, but it felt like no time had passed at all. The parking lot at the reserve was quiet, the only sound coming from the birds in the trees as the two old friends unloaded their gear. After getting their necessary permits from the ranger's office, they set off down the trail toward a remote lake known for its abundance of trout. The hike through the dense forest was peaceful, though the path was narrow and uneven, and the friends had to carry all their equipment. As they walked, the conversation flowed easily, just like old times. Chris spoke about his work in New York, endless meetings, long hours, and the weight of the high-pressure job. "Some days it feels like I'm just chasing my own tail," he said, shaking his head with a half smile. "I'm starting to think about what life could be like if I just quit all this." Ben, on the other hand, shared stories from his days as a teacher. He laughed about a recent incident where he had sprained his ankle playing basketball with some high school students. "The kids were fast, but my body, not so much," he joked. Despite their different paths, the friendship still felt effortless. They were just two old friends catching up, remembering the simpler times. After about an hour's walk, they finally reached the lake. The water sparkled in the morning sun, its smooth surface mirroring the clear blue sky. Tall pine trees lined the shore, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. It was a picture-perfect setting, and both men breathed in the fresh, pine-scented air, feeling a sense of peace that only nature could provide. "This is exactly what we needed," Ben said, taking in the scenery. Chris nodded in agreement, his eyes scanning the water. This was their paradise, a break from the hustle of their respective lives. They inflated a small rubber boat and, with the oars in hand, they pushed off into the middle of the lake. The water was calm, and the only sound was the soft dip of the oars as they rowed further into the lake. Chris and Ben cast their fishing lines into the water, hoping for a good catch. Time seemed to slow as they settled into the rhythm of fishing, each lost in their own thoughts. They talked about old memories, college days, mutual friends, and how much had changed since then. But as the hours passed, the fish weren't biting. The air remained calm, and the water stayed still, with no sign of the trout they had hoped for. However, neither Chris nor Ben was discouraged. They simply enjoyed the time spent together, reminiscing and exchanging thoughts on life. Chris shared his growing desire to retire early, to leave the fast-paced world of finance behind and focus on something more meaningful. Ben nodded, having seen his own fair share of burnout from his teaching career. "Sometimes I think about just walking away from all the stress," Ben admitted, casting his line out again. "Maybe find a quiet place, just like this, where I can breathe." As the evening drew near, the sky began to darken, the fading sun casting a golden glow over the water. A light breeze picked up, rustling the reeds along the shoreline. The friends decided to stay for just another hour, hoping for some luck in the last moments of the day. They slowly steered the boat toward the shore, where tall reeds grew, their movement causing soft ripples on the otherwise calm surface. In those last minutes, neither Chris nor Ben cared whether they caught anything. They were content just to be there, together in a place that reminded them of simpler times. They shared stories, reflected on their lives, and realized just how much they had missed each other over the years. Their friendship had weathered time, distance, and the changes of adulthood. And no matter what, it would always be anchored by memories like this one, on a quiet lake, fishing under the golden light of a setting sun. Suddenly, there was a rustling sound coming from the reeds. Chris assumed it was just the wind, but Ben noticed that the noise was too loud and purposeful to be caused by the breeze. Before they could discuss it, they saw a man sprinting toward them from the shore. He was in his 40s, with a camera slung around his neck and a backpack strapped to his back. He was waving his arms frantically and shouting something that sounded urgent. Chris and Ben exchanged confused glances, trying to make sense of what was happening. The man's words were drowned out by the sound of the wind, making it hard to understand him. The friends instinctively steered the boat toward the shore, eager to hear what he was trying to say. As they neared the land, the stranger's words became clearer. "Danger? Behind you!" he yelled, urgently pointing at something behind them. Chris and Ben both turned to look over their shoulders. At that moment, a loud splash echoed across the water, and something massive emerged from the depths. A 10-foot-long alligator, its powerful body cutting through the water, rose up. Its massive jaws opened wide, revealing rows of sharp, glistening teeth. The creature's eyes glowed with a menacing yellow hue as it hissed loudly and began advancing toward the boat. The friends froze in terror. Chris dropped his fishing rod, his heart racing, while Ben instinctively grabbed the side of the boat to steady himself. Time seemed to freeze as the alligator moved closer, its massive tail slicing through the water with each powerful movement. In a moment of sheer panic, Ben snapped out of his stupor and screamed, "Row! Row to the shore!" Chris didn't hesitate. He grabbed the oars and began rowing furiously, both men desperately trying to reach the safety of the shore before the alligator could close the distance. But the boat was small and slow, and the alligator was gaining on them fast. With each stroke, the boat rocked from the waves created by the reptile's powerful tail, adding to their mounting fear. The man on the shore continued to shout, throwing rocks and sticks into the water in an attempt to distract the alligator. However, the creature seemed unbothered by the commotion. It kept advancing, its jaws still open, ready to strike. The shore was within sight, just a few yards away, but the alligator was right behind them. Its huge jaws snapped open again, and it seemed as though the boat would be the next target. In a panic, Chris and Ben simultaneously leaped out of the boat into the water, scrambling to escape the predator's reach. The cold water hit them, but adrenaline surged through their bodies. They swam as fast as they could, desperate to get to the shore. They could hear the splashing behind them as the alligator churned the water, closing the distance. The fear of being caught propelled them forward, and they pushed themselves harder than they ever thought possible. Their muscles burned from the effort, but they didn't dare look back. They kept their focus on the shore, knowing that every second counted. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they felt their feet touch the muddy bottom as they neared the bank. They pulled themselves out of the water, panting and exhausted, and didn't stop until they were safely on solid ground. The alligator, now far behind, turned and slithered back into the water, its appetite apparently unsatisfied. Chris and Ben collapsed onto the shore, gasping for breath, their bodies shaking from the close call. They couldn't believe what had just happened, still processing the terrifying experience. The man who had warned them jogged over, still panting from his sprint. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Chris and Ben nodded, still catching their breath. "Yeah, we're good," Ben said, wiping the water from his face and trying to steady his racing heart. "Thanks for the warning. You saved our lives." The man smiled, though his relief was obvious. "I've seen that alligator here before. It's been acting more aggressive lately." Chris and Ben looked at each other, the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. They were shaken, but grateful to have made it to safety. What had started as a relaxing fishing trip had turned into a fight for survival, and they knew it was an experience neither of them would ever forget. Chris, Ben, and John scrambled up the shore and dashed into the forest, their hearts pounding. "Faster up a tree," shouted John, the man with the camera, who had followed them. They spotted a large oak tree with low branches and rushed toward it. Ben helped Chris climb first, then hoisted himself up. John struggled but managed to pull himself up just in time, just as the alligator emerged onto the shore. The massive creature slowly approached the base of the tree, snapping its powerful jaws, the sound echoing through the forest. The three men, now several feet above the ground, watched in stunned silence, holding their breath. The immediate danger had passed, and they could now see the alligator more clearly. Its size and strength were even more intimidating up close. Ben was the first to notice something odd. "Look, there's something on its back leg," he said, pointing at the reptile's hind leg. Sure enough, a large metal object was visible, something that resembled a trap, biting into the alligator's flesh. John immediately took out his camera, aiming to capture the moment. "I'm a wildlife photographer," John explained, his voice steady despite the tension. "I saw this predator earlier and was trying to take pictures when I noticed you in the boat." John turned his camera toward them, showing the photos he'd taken. One image clearly depicted the trap embedded in the alligator's leg. "Poor animal," Ben sighed, his expression filled with sympathy. "No wonder it was so aggressive. The pain must have been unbearable." Chris nodded gravely. "It wasn't attacking us. It was trying to ask for help," he said, his voice soft with realization. This new perspective on the situation made everything feel more urgent. Before they could process any further, the distant sound of a vehicle approaching cut through the tension. It was a park ranger in a Jeep, driving toward them. John admitted that he had already called for help before rushing to warn them. The ranger quickly assessed the situation, his face grim, and radioed for backup. Within minutes, a team of wildlife specialists arrived, carrying tranquilizers and medical equipment. They carefully sedated the alligator and started working to free its leg from the trap. After inspecting the wound, the veterinarian assured them that the alligator would make a full recovery. "It's lucky you noticed it," he said to John. "A little longer, and it could have lost its leg." The ranger, his tone serious, looked at the group. "This is definitely the work of poachers," he said. "We need to find them before they hurt more animals. They've been setting traps around the reserve." Feeling responsible for the chain of events, Chris, Ben, and John immediately agreed to help. John, with his photography skills, volunteered to document the evidence, while the others prepared to assist the authorities. The next morning, they returned to the forest with the police. The area was thoroughly searched, and the team quickly discovered several well-hidden traps. John documented each one with precision, capturing detailed photos and marking their locations. Chris and Ben assisted the police by carefully collecting the dangerous traps, determined to ensure that no further harm was done. The investigation carried on for several days. The police set up hidden cameras and organized stakeouts to monitor the situation. Chris, Ben, and John volunteered to help with the surveillance, spending long, quiet hours watching the woods. On the third night, their patience was rewarded. In the dead of night, they spotted suspicious figures moving through the dense brush. The poachers, 3 men, were creeping cautiously through the forest. They were well prepared, equipped with night vision goggles, specialized traps, and tranquilizers, tools of their illegal trade. The police waited until the poachers started checking their traps before launching their operation. Chris, Ben, and John watched in tense silence as the officers closed in. A high-speed chase soon broke out. The poachers, realizing they were being pursued, bolted deeper into the woods, using their knowledge of the terrain to evade capture. The officers pursued, shouting orders and flashing lights, while the sounds of the chase filled the air. The crackle of branches breaking, labored breathing, and the barks of police dogs. Despite being told to stay hidden, Chris, Ben, and John couldn't resist the urge to move closer. They quietly followed the chase, careful not to interfere with the police. As they moved through the woods, they heard the sound of splashing water. One of the poachers, in a last-ditch effort to escape, had attempted to swim across a small lake. The poacher made a fatal mistake when the alligator they had helped tase earlier emerged from the water. Now fully recovered, it charged through the water and swiftly caught the poacher in its jaws, dragging him under. The police, in shock, watched as the alligator enacted its own form of justice. The remaining poachers were quickly captured and their illegal activities exposed. The police recovered the traps, and the alligator had successfully defended its territory. Chris, Ben, and John watched the alligator swim away, realizing that justice had been served. The police acted quickly to save the remaining poacher. An officer with wildlife expertise used an acoustic deterrent to drag the alligator away, allowing 2 officers to rescue the trembling man. All 3 poachers were arrested and taken to the station. A search of their homes revealed disturbing evidence, including stuffed rare birds, pelts of endangered animals, and illegal hunting gear. The poachers were sentenced to long prison terms and heavy fines, and their story gained media attention, highlighting the growing problem of poaching. Chris, Ben, and John's courage to expose the criminals inspired others to take action for wildlife conservation, showing that even small efforts can make a big difference in protecting endangered species.